On June 22, 1941, the German Wehrmacht launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in military history, thrusting over 3 million Axis troops into Soviet territory. The Nazi invasion shattered the non-aggression pact between Germany and the Soviet Union and opened the bloodiest front of World War II. Within weeks, vast regions of Soviet Ukraine, Belarus, and the western USSR were overrun. Soviet defenses, unprepared for the scale and speed of the assault, crumbled under the blitzkrieg. The Red Army suffered catastrophic losses, hundreds of thousands of troops captured, thousands of aircraft and tanks destroyed, and entire divisions wiped out. Amid this chaos, the Soviet Union called on every citizen to defend the motherland. It was under this desperate mobilization that Lyudmila Pavlichenko answered the call to arms. Lyudmila Mikhailivna Pavlichenko was born on July 12, 1916, in Bila Tserkva, in what was then part of the Ukrainian SSR. Before the war, she was a history student at Kyiv University, with an academic focus on Soviet education and industrial labor. But beyond academics, Pavlichenko had already developed skills that would soon become invaluable. During her teenage years, she joined a shooting club affiliated with the Soviet paramilitary organization OSSOVIAKHIM, Society for the Promotion of Defense, Aviation, and Chemical Construction. These organizations prepared civilians for potential military service, training them in marksmanship, first aid, and basic tactics. Pavlichenko's training with small arms gave her a proficiency in shooting long before she ever set foot on the battlefield. When news of the German invasion reached Kyiv, Pavlichenko was 24 years old. The Nazi army was advancing rapidly through Ukraine, targeting key industrial and agricultural regions. The Soviet government declared a state of total war, mobilizing both men and women. Pavlichenko immediately volunteered for the Red Army, determined to fight. When she first presented herself for service, recruitment officers tried to assign her to a nursing unit, as was typical for women volunteers. Pavlichenko refused. She insisted on being assigned to the infantry as a combatant. After presenting her marksman certificate and demonstrating her shooting ability, she was accepted into the 25th Rifle Division of the Red Army, specifically the 54th Independent Rifle Regiment. Her enlistment took place in the summer of 1941, at a time when Soviet forces were struggling to regroup. The 25th Rifle Division, stationed near Odessa, was part of the Coastal Defense Forces under the separate Coastal Army. The German advance through southern Ukraine forced the Soviets to withdraw to defensive positions along the Black Sea coast. The siege of Odessa began in August 1941, marking one of the first major defensive battles of the Eastern Front. For Pavlichenko, Odessa became the proving ground that transformed her from a student into one of the most effective snipers in military history. At the start of her deployment, Pavlichenko was issued a standard Mosin Nagant Model 1891/30 rifle, equipped with a PU telescopic sight, the same weapon used by most Soviet snipers. The rifle was rugged, accurate, and capable of lethal precision at long range. Snipers in the Red Army operated differently from their Western counterparts. They were not limited to reconnaissance or harassment roles, but were used aggressively to disrupt enemy infantry, officers, machine gun crews, and artillery spotters. Pavlichenko quickly adapted to this system, applying both patience and discipline to her missions. The Soviet sniper program expanded rapidly in 1941 and 1942 due to the high casualty rates among frontline soldiers. Snipers were seen as force multipliers, individuals who could inflict significant damage on the enemy while minimizing risk. Training was conducted both in the field and in specialized schools. But for many, including Pavlichenko, Combat itself became the real classroom. Within her first days in Odessa, she achieved her initial confirmed kills. 2 German soldiers approached Soviet positions on reconnaissance. Pavlichenko waited until both were within range, then eliminated them with 2 precise shots. This act secured her place among the sniper ranks and began her record of confirmed kills. The Red Army placed heavy emphasis on discipline, camouflage, and psychological endurance for snipers. Pavlichenko and her comrades spent hours lying motionless in concealment, often under extreme conditions: heat, mud, or exposure to enemy fire. They operated in pairs, one acting as spotter while the other fired. Pavlichenko often worked with male counterparts, and despite initial skepticism about women in combat, her performance silenced any doubts. She quickly gained respect for her accuracy and composure under fire. The broader strategic situation in southern Ukraine remained dire. The Romanian army, supported by German units, encircled Odessa in August 1941. The Soviet defenders, numbering around 86,000 troops, faced overwhelming enemy strength. However, the defense of Odessa lasted 73 days, far longer than the Axis expected. Pavlichenko participated in engagements throughout this siege, providing covering fire for infantry advances and defending key sectors against enemy breakthroughs. Her skill as a sniper made her a vital asset, targeting officers, artillery observers, and enemy snipers who threatened Soviet positions. The Soviets maintained detailed kill confirmations through unit reports and spotter verification. By the end of the Odessa campaign in October 1941, Pavlichenko had already recorded 187 confirmed kills. This number placed her among the highest-scoring snipers in the Red Army at that point in the war. Her effectiveness also reflected the Soviet doctrine of using snipers to counteract the technological advantages of the Wehrmacht. German units, trained for rapid mechanized warfare, often suffered heavy losses in close, static battles where Soviet snipers excelled. When Odessa finally fell in October 1941, the Soviet High Command ordered an evacuation to prevent the defenders from being surrounded. Pavlichenko's unit was withdrawn across the Black Sea to Sevastopol, located on the Crimean Peninsula. The transfer was part of the Soviet plan to hold Crimea as a strategic fortress. Sevastopol was vital for controlling the Black Sea and preventing Axis naval dominance. For Pavlichenko, this relocation marked the transition to a new phase of her combat career, one that would cement her reputation and earn her the title Lady Death. Before her departure from Odessa, Pavlichenko's name had already begun circulating within her division. She had gained a reputation for not only her high kill count, but also her ability to locate and neutralize enemy snipers, a dangerous and specialized skill. German and Romanian forces began deploying counter-snipers specifically to target her. Pavlichenko developed methods to counter these threats, such as relocating frequently, using decoy firing positions, and exploiting terrain for concealment. Her performance also aligned with the Soviet Union's broader use of propaganda to inspire resistance. The early months of the war had been disastrous for the USSR, with vast territories lost and millions of casualties. Figures like Pavlichenko became symbols of resilience and defiance. Soviet newspapers began reporting on the growing number of successful snipers at the front, especially highlighting women soldiers as examples of equality and patriotism. Pavlichenko's achievements were soon featured in Red Army bulletins, emphasizing her as a model of courage. The Soviet Union's policy of mobilizing women in combat was unique among major powers during World War II. While women served primarily in auxiliary roles in Western armies, the USSR deployed hundreds of thousands of women in direct combat positions as pilots, machine gunners, medics, and snipers. This was partly out of necessity due to enormous manpower losses and partly due to ideological reasons. Marxist-Leninist doctrine promoted gender equality in labor and defense, and Pavlichenko's success served as tangible proof of this principle in practice. Pavlichenko's unit, the 25th Rifle Division, was composed largely of Ukrainians, many of whom were fighting to defend their homeland from occupation. The morale within these units was shaped by the brutality of the Nazi invasion. German occupation policies in Ukraine were particularly severe, with mass executions, destruction of villages, and persecution of civilians. These atrocities hardened Soviet soldiers' resolve. For Pavlichenko and her comrades, the war was not only about defending the Soviet state, but also about reclaiming their homes from an invading enemy. As the Red Army began to reorganize and stabilize its defensive lines in late 1941, individual snipers became critical in holding positions. Pavlichenko's contributions fit into this broader tactical adaptation. Soviet command began formally recognizing elite snipers, awarding them medals, and assigning them to instruct new recruits. Pavlichenko herself started mentoring younger snipers, sharing techniques in stalking, camouflage, and range estimation. These methods were incorporated into the sniper training programs that expanded across the front in 1942. By the end of 1941, Pavlichenko had survived months of frontline combat under constant bombardment, endured siege conditions, and demonstrated exceptional marksmanship. Her record of confirmed kills, her survival through 2 major campaigns, and her growing tactical expertise established her as one of the Red Army's most valuable individual soldiers. The Soviet Union's mobilization in the wake of Operation Barbarossa had transformed millions of civilians into soldiers. And Pavlichenko's story was part of this immense national effort. Her journey from a Kyiv University student to a frontline sniper symbolized the total war the USSR was waging, one in which every capable individual, regardless of gender or background, was drawn into the fight for survival. When she arrived in Sevastopol at the end of 1941, the Soviet Union was entering its second winter of war. The Eastern Front stretched from Leningrad to the Caucasus, with both sides suffering massive casualties. The Germans sought to capture Sevastopol to secure control over the Crimean Peninsula and open routes toward the oil-rich regions of the Caucasus. The stage was set for one of the most brutal sieges of the war. For Lyudmila Pavlichenko, it was also the stage on which she would become a legend. When Lyudmila Pavlichenko arrived with the 25th Rifle Division in Odessa in August 1941, the German invasion had already driven deep into Soviet Ukraine. The Black Sea port city became one of the first major defensive strongholds against the Axis advance in the southern sector. The defense of Odessa was organized under the separate Coastal Army, consisting of Red Army, NKVD, and naval infantry units. Facing them were the combined forces of the Romanian Fourth Army, supported by elements of Germany's 11th Army under General Erich von Manstein. The Romanian army committed over 340,000 men, outnumbering the Soviet defenders nearly 4-1. Despite being encircled on land, the Soviets maintained supply lines across the Black Sea, allowing them to hold out far longer than Axis command expected. For Pavlichenko, this was her first experience of sustained combat. The front lines around Odessa were fluid, consisting of trenches, fortified positions, and urban ruins. Snipers like Pavlichenko operated in these conditions with a combination of stealth, discipline, and endurance. Her assignment was primarily on the southern perimeter of the defense line, in areas where Romanian troops made repeated assaults to capture the port facilities and surrounding industrial zones. The fighting was close, intense, and often chaotic. At the beginning of the siege, Pavlichenko was not yet a widely recognized sniper. Her unit initially assigned her to standard infantry duties, where she assisted in constructing defensive positions and repelling enemy infantry assaults. However, her proficiency with the Mosin Nagant rifle quickly became evident. During one engagement, 2 German reconnaissance soldiers advanced near her position. Pavlichenko, hidden in a trench with her rifle, waited until both came within 400 meters. She fired 2 shots in quick succession. Both targets fell. Her platoon commander, witnessing the event, confirmed the kills. That moment formally marked her initiation as a sniper within the division. The Soviet command began assigning her to sniper-specific operations, where the objective was to target enemy officers, machine gun crews, and forward observers. Pavlichenko's daily missions required careful preparation. Soviet snipers typically worked in pairs, a sniper and a spotter. The spotter's job was to observe enemy movement, measure distances, and watch for counter-sniper activity. Pavlichenko often alternated between both roles depending on the tactical situation. The terrain around Odessa provided both opportunities and challenges for snipers. Open fields, orchards, and industrial ruins offered concealment. But the summer heat and lack of cover made prolonged observation difficult. Pavlichenko adapted by using camouflage crafted from local vegetation and Soviet-issue sniper cloaks. She learned to create small observation pits, nests, covered with earth and grass, which allowed her to stay hidden for hours. Soviet sniper doctrine emphasized patience, firing only when certain of a kill was critical. Each shot risked revealing the sniper's position, and German and Romanian counter-snipers were quick to respond. During the siege, Pavlichenko refined her ability to estimate range and compensate for bullet drop and wind. The Mosin Nagant rifle's effective range was about 800 meters with the PU scope. Those skilled snipers could achieve accurate shots beyond 1,000 meters. Pavlichenko recorded many of her early kills between 300 and 600 meters, typical distances in urban and semi-rural battlefields. She also practiced a technique known as double firing. 2 shots fired in quick succession from slightly different positions to confuse enemy spotters about her exact location. Her kill count rose steadily as the siege continued. Within weeks, she had eliminated dozens of enemy soldiers, including officers directing artillery fire. Each confirmed kill required verification by an officer or spotter, following Red Army procedures to prevent exaggeration. The psychological effect of Soviet snipers on the Axis troops was considerable. German and Romanian reports from the Odessa front noted increased caution among officers, who began limiting their exposure on the battlefield. As the siege wore on, Axis forces intensified their attacks, using artillery and air bombardment to soften Soviet defenses. Pavlichenko's unit often operated under heavy shelling. Snipers were particularly valuable during these bombardments. While artillery suppressed the Soviet trenches, snipers targeted advancing infantry, attempting to exploit the chaos. Pavlichenko described in later accounts how she often remained in position even as explosions shook the ground around her. Abandoning a concealed nest risked detection, and her endurance became one of her defining traits. One of her notable early encounters involved a duel with an enemy sniper. The Romanian and German armies deployed trained marksmen to hunt Soviet snipers, and these duels were deadly contests of patience. After several Soviet soldiers were killed by a hidden enemy shooter, Pavlichenko volunteered to locate the sniper. She observed the battlefield through her scope for hours, watching for subtle signs: a glint of glass, a movement of grass, or the reflection of sunlight off a rifle barrel. Eventually, she detected a flash from a damaged wall section. She fired a decoy shot from one position, then quickly shifted a few meters and fired again. The second shot struck the enemy sniper as he attempted to spot her first position. Encounters like this built her growing reputation within the 25th Rifle Division as a reliable and deadly marksman. By late August 1941, Pavlichenko's confirmed kills had surpassed 100. The Red Army's command structure in Odessa began to use her example to motivate new recruits. She was ordered to train fresh snipers drawn from infantry ranks. Her training emphasized fieldcraft, camouflage, and psychological control, the ability to remain calm under stress and to avoid revealing one's position. Sniper teams under her instruction operated along key sectors of the defense, contributing significantly to holding the lines despite being outnumbered. The Soviet defense of Odessa was remarkable for its coordination between Army, Navy, and civilian resistance. The Black Sea Fleet provided artillery support, and naval infantry units reinforced the ground troops. Civilians assisted by building fortifications and transporting ammunition. Pavlichenko's position often placed her near these joint operations. She covered naval infantry advances and provided counter-sniper fire during assaults on Romanian trenches. Soviet reports from this period indicate that snipers accounted for a notable percentage of Axis officer casualties, disrupting enemy command structures during repeated assaults. Conditions deteriorated as September progressed. Food shortages, exhaustion, and continuous shelling took a toll on defenders. Snipers like Pavlichenko adapted to night operations, taking advantage of low light to relocate or prepare new positions. While night firing was uncommon due to limited visibility, snipers used darkness to move closer to enemy lines and set ambush points for dawn offensives. Pavlichenko maintained a daily routine of reconnaissance, firing, and reporting. Her meticulous record-keeping allowed accurate documentation of her confirmed kills. The Axis command underestimated the Soviet defense. Expecting to capture Odessa within a week, the siege extended for 73 days. Romanian units suffered heavy losses, nearly 100,000 casualties by October. Sniper fire contributed significantly to these losses, especially among officers and NCOs. Pavlichenko's precision shooting helped slow enemy advances, buying time for Soviet forces to organize evacuations and prepare new defensive lines further east. By the end of September, Pavlichenko's name had begun appearing in internal army bulletins. Her confirmed kill count reached 187 during the Odessa campaign. This number was verified through official documentation and field reports, an unusually high figure for such a short period. She was awarded commendations for bravery, though the full recognition of her achievements would come later. The German and Romanian armies began to take notice of the Soviet sniper threat. Leaflets distributed among Axis troops warned soldiers to avoid exposing themselves near certain sectors known to contain dangerous Russian women shooters. Psychological warfare worked both ways. Pavlichenko's growing reputation demoralized the enemy while strengthening Soviet morale. The nickname Lady Death had not yet been coined, but within her division, her presence was already synonymous with lethal accuracy. Despite the tactical success of snipers, the overall strategic situation forced the Soviet command to withdraw from Odessa. On October 15, 1941, Stavka, the Soviet High Command, ordered an evacuation to preserve the defending forces for the defense of Sevastopol. The withdrawal was executed under the cover of night and naval protection. Pavlichenko's unit was among the last to leave, providing sniper cover during the evacuation of troops and equipment onto transport ships. Maintaining concealment under bombardment, she and her team prevented Axis patrols from approaching Soviet embarkation points. The evacuation marked the end of the Odessa campaign, but not the end of Pavlichenko's service. Her success in Odessa brought her to the attention of higher command. She was promoted and assigned to continue sniper operations with the same division in Sevastopol. By that time, her confirmed tally and growing expertise made her one of the most successful snipers in the Soviet Army. The Battle of Odessa was a pivotal stage in Pavlichenko's development as a combatant. It was during this campaign that she mastered the fundamental elements of sniping: patience, camouflage, marksmanship, and psychological resilience. She learned how to adapt under siege conditions, to function independently without direct command oversight, and to integrate sniper tactics into the broader defensive strategy of the Red Army. For the Soviet Union, Odessa demonstrated that even under overwhelming odds, determined resistance could delay and bleed the Axis advance. For Pavlichenko personally, it was the foundation of her transformation from a volunteer soldier to one of the most feared individuals on the Eastern Front. Her performance in Odessa set the precedent for her future campaigns in Sevastopol, where her confirmed kills would continue to rise, and her legend as Lady Death would take form. By the time her unit boarded the ships bound for Crimea, Pavlichenko had already established herself as a professional sniper, with 187 confirmed kills, an unprecedented record for a woman soldier in any army at that time. The skills, tactics, and discipline she developed in Odessa would soon be tested again under even harsher conditions. The fight for Sevastopol would not only define her career, but also etch her name permanently into the military history of the Second World War. When the evacuation from Odessa concluded in October 1941, Lyudmila Pavlichenko and her surviving comrades of the 25th Rifle Division were transferred across the Black Sea to the Crimean Peninsula. Their destination was Sevastopol, a heavily fortified port city and the principal naval base of the Soviet Black Sea Fleet. Strategically, Sevastopol was vital. It served as both a military stronghold and a gateway to the Caucasus, where Soviet oil production was concentrated. The Axis High Command, led by Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, recognized its capture as essential to securing the southern flank of the Eastern Front. For Pavlichenko, the defense of Sevastopol would become the most defining chapter of her combat career. Upon arrival, the 25th Rifle Division was immediately assigned to the city's defensive perimeter. The separate coastal army, under General Ivan Petrov, was tasked with holding Sevastopol against repeated assaults by the German 11th Army and supporting Romanian units. By late 1941, the Germans had captured most of the Crimean Peninsula, leaving Sevastopol isolated and surrounded by land. Supplies and reinforcements could only arrive via the sea under the protection of the Soviet Navy. The siege would last for 250 days, from October 1941 until July 1942, making it one of the longest and bloodiest sieges on the Eastern Front. The terrain around Sevastopol presented ideal conditions for sniper warfare. The area was characterized by rocky hills, ravines, and sparse vegetation, which offered natural concealment and elevated vantage points. Pavlichenko quickly adapted her Odessa-honed skills to these new conditions. She established firing positions along the northern and southern defense sectors, often remaining in place for hours or even days to monitor enemy movement. Sniper operations in Sevastopol were coordinated through platoon-level intelligence officers who directed marksmen to key defensive zones threatened by enemy reconnaissance or command elements. In Sevastopol, Pavlichenko's efficiency as a sniper increased dramatically. Her experience allowed her to identify officer insignia, prioritize targets, and anticipate Axis movements. She worked primarily in two-person teams, alternating between sniper and spotter duties. Soviet doctrine emphasized that snipers should not only eliminate enemy soldiers, but also demoralize advancing forces by striking critical personnel such as platoon leaders, radio operators, and machine gun crews. Pavlichenko specialized in identifying such targets, using her scope to study enemy trenches and waiting for moments of vulnerability. Throughout the winter of 1941 to 1942, the Axis repeatedly attempted to breach Sevastopol's defenses. Each offensive involved massive artillery bombardments followed by infantry and armored assaults. Pavlichenko's sniper team often operated ahead of infantry lines, taking up concealed positions in shell craters or behind rubble. She used both her issued Mosin Nagant Model 1891/30 sniper rifle and captured German Mauser rifles when available, depending on the situation. Her shot accuracy remained high even under extreme conditions, including freezing temperatures, limited food supplies, and continuous enemy fire. By early 1942, her confirmed kill count had risen beyond 200. This figure was carefully documented through Red Army verification protocols, which required confirmation by either a commanding officer or a fellow sniper. Pavlichenko's growing tally earned her official recognition within her division, and she was soon promoted to the rank of senior sergeant. Her success also led to her assignment as a sniper instructor for new recruits. Despite shortages of equipment, Pavlichenko helped establish basic sniper training within the division, focusing on field discipline, camouflage techniques, and psychological endurance. Many of her trainees later recorded significant kill counts of their own, demonstrating the effectiveness of her instruction. The Germans, aware of Soviet sniper activity, began deploying their own trained marksmen to counter the threat. These sniper duels became a defining feature of Pavlichenko's experience in Sevastopol. A duel could last for hours or even days. The opposing snipers would attempt to detect each other's positions using deception and patience. Pavlichenko's record includes 36 confirmed sniper versus sniper kills, a remarkable figure indicating both skill and survival against highly trained adversaries. One of her most notable engagements occurred during the spring of 1942. A German sniper, believed to have been trained in specialized Wehrmacht sniper schools, had been inflicting steady casualties on Soviet soldiers in a specific sector. Pavlichenko volunteered to neutralize him. For 3 days, she observed the battlefield, studying where each shot had originated. On the 4th day, she detected a faint glint of light from a camouflaged position. She maneuvered to a new vantage point and waited. When the enemy sniper fired again, the muzzle flash revealed his location. Pavlichenko fired a single shot that struck him directly. After the engagement, she confirmed the kill by crawling forward under cover of darkness to inspect the position. The dead sniper was found wearing German insignia, and his logbook indicated over 200 kills, a testament to the skill of her opponent and the significance of her victory. Such duels were not only tactical encounters, but also psychological contests. The Germans and Soviets both used propaganda to amplify the exploits of their top snipers, turning them into symbols of national pride. Within the Red Army, Pavlichenko's achievements were circulated in internal bulletins and newspapers to inspire troops. By mid-1942, her official confirmed kills exceeded 300, including the 36 enemy snipers she personally eliminated. The German forces reportedly began referring to her as Die Tote Dame, the Lady of Death, a nickname that later translated into the Soviet moniker Lady Death. The tactical situation in Sevastopol continued to deteriorate. German artillery and Luftwaffe bombing raids intensified throughout the spring. The Germans introduced heavy siege guns, including the 600mm Karl Gerät mortars and the 800mm Schwerer Gustav railway gun, capable of leveling entire fortifications. Despite the relentless bombardment, Soviet defenders, including Pavlichenko's division, maintained strong resistance. Snipers played a crucial role during this stage of the siege, targeting forward artillery observers and engineers who were essential to the German offensive. Pavlichenko's ability to remain calm under pressure became legendary among her comrades. Accounts from fellow soldiers describe her spending entire days motionless in sniper nests under direct shell fire. She often shared food and ammunition with other snipers, prioritizing mission readiness over comfort. Her professionalism and composure earned her the respect of officers and soldiers alike. In May 1942, during one of the major German offensives, Pavlichenko was wounded by mortar fire. Shrapnel struck her face, causing severe injuries. Despite her wounds, she refused evacuation until ordered by her commanding officer. After recovery, she returned to active duty, resuming sniper missions within weeks. Her resilience underlined the determination characteristic of Soviet frontline troops during the most desperate phase of the war. The final German assault on Sevastopol began in June 1942. The Axis forces launched a coordinated offensive involving over 200,000 troops, 600 aircraft, and massive artillery support. The Soviet defenders, numbering fewer than 100,000 by that time, were exhausted and short on ammunition. Pavlichenko's unit was deployed in the northern defensive sector, which bore the brunt of the attack. As German infantry advanced through the ruins, Soviet snipers were ordered to inflict maximum casualties to slow their progress. Pavlichenko continued to operate until she was seriously wounded again by mortar fragments. This injury forced her evacuation by submarine across the Black Sea. By the time she was removed from Sevastopol in June 1942, Pavlichenko's officially confirmed kill count stood at 309. This included infantry, officers, artillery spotters, and snipers. Her record made her not only the most successful female sniper in history, but also one of the highest-scoring snipers of any gender during World War II. The magnitude of her achievements drew attention from the highest levels of Soviet command. After her evacuation, she was awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union, the nation's highest military honor. Her departure from the front coincided with the fall of Sevastopol. On July 4, 1942, German forces finally captured the city after months of relentless siege. The loss was a significant strategic setback for the Soviet Union, but the defenders' resistance had delayed Axis operations in the south, buying time for the Soviet Union to regroup and prepare for the next offensive time for Soviet counteroffensives elsewhere. The heroism displayed by soldiers like Pavlichenko became a key element in Soviet wartime morale and propaganda. In Moscow, Pavlichenko's name became widely known. Her record was publicized as an example of Soviet strength, discipline, and equality. She was transferred from active combat to a new role in military training and morale building. The Red Army's sniper program expanded dramatically in 1942 to 1943, drawing inspiration from her experience. Sniper schools were established across the Soviet Union, training tens of thousands of marksmen and markswomen who would later play critical roles in battles such as Stalingrad and Kursk. Pavlichenko's experiences in Sevastopol marked the peak of her combat career. The siege tested every aspect of her skill: endurance, precision, and tactical intelligence. Her ability to survive and dominate in one of the most brutal environments of the war set her apart from her contemporaries. German records later recovered confirmed significant losses among officers and specialists in the Sevastopol sector, many attributed to sniper activity. Soviet military historians estimate that snipers like Pavlichenko disrupted Axis command and control structures, contributing to the prolonged defense of the city. Her conduct also influenced Red Army policy toward the recognition of women in combat. Before 1941, women in the Soviet military were often restricted to medical or logistical roles. Pavlichenko's success helped break this convention, leading to greater integration of women into combat positions. By 1943, nearly 2,000 women had served as snipers on the Eastern Front, many citing Pavlichenko as their model. In the months following her withdrawal, Pavlichenko underwent medical treatment before being reassigned to public and diplomatic duties. Her wartime record was beyond dispute. 309 confirmed kills, 36 of them snipers, achieved under siege and constant combat conditions. The title, Lady Death, first used by German troops in fear and frustration, became a badge of honor in Soviet propaganda, symbolizing both individual skill and the collective defiance of the Soviet people against the Nazi invasion. By the end of 1942, Pavlichenko's transformation from a university student to one of the most effective soldiers in the Red Army was complete. The siege of Sevastopol had elevated her from an accomplished sniper to a national icon. Her battlefield career, marked by precision, endurance, and discipline, represented the peak of Soviet sniper warfare during World War II. The fall of Sevastopol closed one chapter of the war, but for Pavlichenko, it opened another. A new mission off the battlefield, where her reputation would serve the Soviet cause in diplomacy and propaganda as powerfully as her rifle had done on the front lines. By the summer of 1942, Lyudmila Pavlichenko had endured almost a full year of continuous front-line combat. Her record of 309 confirmed kills, including 36 enemy snipers, placed her among the most effective marksmen in the Red Army and one of the most successful snipers in world history. However, the brutal siege of Sevastopol took a severe toll on her physically and mentally. Continuous exposure to combat, bombardment, and exhaustion, combined with multiple injuries, forced her removal from the battlefield. The decision to withdraw her from frontline service marked a turning point in both her life and the Soviet Union's use of her image as a symbol of wartime resilience and patriotism. Her final injury came during the last phase of the defense of Sevastopol in June 1942. As German and Romanian forces launched their final offensive with overwhelming artillery and air support, Soviet defenders suffered devastating losses. Pavlichenko's unit, part of the 25th Rifle Division, was entrenched in the northern defensive sector, which was under constant shell fire. During one bombardment, a mortar explosion threw fragments across her position, wounding her severely in the face and shoulder. Even after being hit, she reportedly continued directing sniper fire until ordered to evacuate by her commanding officer. She was transported across the Black Sea to a Soviet naval hospital, where she underwent surgery and recovery. The evacuation likely saved her life. Within weeks, Sevastopol fell to the Axis after 250 days of resistance. Most of the Soviet troops who remained in the city were killed or captured. Pavlichenko's survival ensured that one of the Red Army's most celebrated soldiers would live to continue serving the Soviet cause in another capacity. After medical treatment and a period of convalescence, she was deemed unfit for further frontline combat. Instead, the Soviet High Command reassigned her to a new and strategically important role: morale, recruitment, and propaganda. By mid-1942, the Soviet Union was engaged in a total war effort, facing enormous casualties and material losses. The Battle of Stalingrad was approaching, and the morale of both troops and civilians was under severe strain. The government's propaganda apparatus, directed by the Central Committee and the Political Directorate of the Red Army, sought to strengthen public resolve by highlighting figures who symbolized courage and patriotism. Pavlichenko's record made her an ideal candidate. She was young, disciplined, academically educated, and, most importantly, a proven combat veteran with an extraordinary record. Her first assignments after recovery involved appearances at Red Army training schools and industrial factories, where she spoke about the importance of perseverance and the duty of every Soviet citizen to contribute to victory. She visited sniper training programs, sharing her combat experience and instructing new marksmen. The Red Army was expanding its sniper corps rapidly at this time, drawing lessons from early war successes. Pavlichenko's practical knowledge of camouflage, range estimation, and patience under fire became foundational to Soviet sniper doctrine. Manuals and lectures written with her input emphasized psychological resilience, situational awareness, and careful shot selection. Her image also began to feature prominently in Soviet wartime publications. Newspapers and magazines such as Krasnaya Zvezda, Red Star, and Pravda printed articles about her wartime achievements. Official press releases described her as a model of Soviet womanhood and heroism. Her story demonstrated the Soviet Union's claim of gender equality in the fight against fascism. While Western militaries generally restricted women to non-combat roles, the USSR celebrated women like Pavlichenko, pilots of the Night Witches Regiment, and female machine gunners as symbols of collective national strength. In September 1942, Pavlichenko received the title Hero of the Soviet Union, the nation's highest honor for valor in combat. She was also awarded the Order of Lenin and several campaign medals. These awards elevated her status not only within the military, but also in Soviet society at large. However, her significance extended beyond internal propaganda. The Soviet Union recognized her potential value as a representative on the international stage, especially among Allied nations whose support was crucial for sustaining the war effort. By 1942, the Soviet government sought to strengthen its alliance with the United States and Great Britain through public diplomacy. With the USSR bearing the brunt of the fighting on the Eastern Front, Soviet leaders wanted Western publics to understand the scale of their sacrifice. Pavlichenko, as a decorated frontline veteran and articulate speaker, was chosen to participate in an international goodwill tour. She became the first Soviet combat soldier to visit the Allied countries during the war. In June 1942, shortly after her recovery, Pavlichenko joined a Soviet delegation that traveled first to Canada and then to the United States. The visit was part of a broader Soviet effort to secure greater material support through the Lend-Lease program and to influence Western public opinion in favor of opening a second front in Europe. Pavlichenko's presence drew immense media attention. She was only 26 years old, but her combat record and calm, authoritative demeanor made her stand out. Upon arrival in Washington, D.C., Pavlichenko met President Franklin D. Roosevelt and First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt at the White House. Eleanor Roosevelt took a particular interest in her, impressed by her composure and intelligence. The two women developed a friendship that lasted years beyond the war. Eleanor later wrote about their meeting in her newspaper column, describing Pavlichenko as a very serious young woman who has seen more than anyone her age should have to see. Pavlichenko's American tour was heavily covered by the press, though not always respectfully. Some reporters, unaccustomed to seeing women in combat roles, asked trivial or condescending questions about her appearance, clothing, and use of makeup rather than her military experience. Pavlichenko famously responded to one such question by saying, "I wear my uniform with honor. It has the Order of Lenin on it. It has been covered with blood in battle. What do you have to offer in exchange?" Her directness and refusal to engage in frivolous topics earned her both admiration and notoriety. She also delivered speeches across the United States, emphasizing the need for Allied unity and calling for the opening of a second front in Western Europe to relieve pressure on Soviet forces. In Chicago, she addressed a crowd of more than 10,000 people, declaring, "Gentlemen, I am 25 years old, and I have killed 309 fascist invaders by now. Don't you think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" The blunt statement drew loud applause and became one of the most famous quotes of the war's Allied diplomacy. Her tour extended to Canada and Great Britain, where she met officials and military personnel, sharing first-hand accounts of combat on the Eastern Front. The visits were strategically successful for Soviet propaganda. They humanized the Soviet war effort to Western audiences, portraying Soviet soldiers as disciplined and courageous allies rather than ideological strangers. Pavlichenko's presence, as both a woman and a soldier, also challenged prevailing Western stereotypes about the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, back in the USSR, her image continued to be utilized in posters, pamphlets, and wartime films. She was depicted as a defender of the homeland, a scholar-turned-soldier who had proven the unity of Soviet intellect and courage. The Red Army's recruitment campaigns used her example to encourage women to enlist in combat and technical roles. By 1943, the number of female snipers had grown significantly, with many citing Pavlichenko's example as their inspiration. Her contributions to sniper training during this period were substantial. She participated in the development of instruction manuals and training courses for new recruits. Soviet sniper schools, such as the Central Women's Sniper Training School near Moscow, incorporated lessons based on her field experiences in Odessa and Sevastopol. These programs emphasized concealment, endurance, and precision, all qualities Pavlichenko had demonstrated on the battlefield. As the war progressed and the Soviet Union gained momentum after Stalingrad, Pavlichenko remained active in morale and training efforts. She continued to visit hospitals, factories, and military academies, speaking directly to soldiers and workers. Her speeches consistently focused on discipline, unity, and the necessity of sacrifice. Though she no longer fired a rifle in combat, her influence on the Soviet war effort remained significant. Pavlichenko's diplomatic and propaganda work also reflected the Soviet Union's broader shift in strategy. As victory became more attainable after 1943, the focus of propaganda moved from survival to triumph. Figures like Pavlichenko embodied both the suffering and the determination of the Soviet people. Her story was used to symbolize the merging of intellect and heroism, a student of history who had herself become part of it through action. After the war, Pavlichenko's experiences on the diplomatic front continued to shape her public role. She maintained contact with Eleanor Roosevelt and returned to academic pursuits, completing her degree in history at Kiev University. However, her wartime years as a sniper and public representative of the Soviet cause remained central to her identity. The government continued to feature her in veteran commemorations, military ceremonies, and historical publications. Her transition from battlefield to propaganda front demonstrated the Soviet state's ability to repurpose individual heroism for national mobilization. The Red Army recognized that Pavlichenko's combat career had reached its physical limit, but her symbolic power remained immense. She was no longer a soldier in the trenches of Sevastopol. She had become a weapon of words and presence, an embodiment of the Soviet Union's resilience under fire. By the end of 1942, Lyudmila Pavlichenko's rifle had been set aside, but her service to the Soviet Union continued in a different form. Through her speeches, training, and international advocacy, she extended her impact far beyond the range of any sniper rifle. The image of Lady Death evolved from that of a deadly marksman to a living symbol of the Soviet struggle, a woman who had personally fought the invaders and then stood before the world to demand recognition for the sacrifices of her people. Her wartime injuries had removed her from combat, but they also placed her in a position where her voice became as powerful as her aim. The Soviet Union capitalized on her reputation to strengthen both domestic morale and international alliances. Through her, the world saw not just a sniper, but the human face of a nation fighting for survival and victory. when the guns of the Second World War finally fell silent in 1945. Lyudmila Pavlichenko stood as one of the most accomplished snipers in military history. Her total of 309 confirmed kills, including 36 enemy snipers, placed her among the top Soviet sharpshooters and made her the deadliest female sniper ever recorded. Yet her legacy extended far beyond numbers. Pavlichenko's service became an enduring symbol of Soviet resilience, gender equality in wartime mobilization, and the power of individual determination within collective struggle. The years following the war transformed her from a battlefield legend into a cornerstone of Soviet memory and military tradition. After returning from her diplomatic tour in the United States and Great Britain in 1942, Pavlichenko resumed her service in the Red Army, though she never returned to the front. Her wartime injuries and the strain of 2 major campaigns had taken a physical toll that made further combat impossible. Instead, she served as an instructor and consultant in sniper training programs for the remainder of the war. The Soviet military had by then institutionalized sniper warfare as a key tactical element. Thousands of soldiers, both men and women, were trained using field-tested doctrines drawn from the experiences of Pavlichenko and her peers. Her combat methods, stealth, patient observation, precision marksmanship, and coordination with infantry became foundational principles of Soviet sniper instruction. Within the Red Army, Pavlichenko was revered not only as a hero, but as an authority on sniper tactics. Reports from the Central Women's Sniper Training School near Moscow and other training centers show that her name was invoked frequently during instruction. Recruits studied her field strategies from Odessa and Sevastopol as examples of efficient sniper deployment under siege conditions. Her approach to counter-sniper operations, using decoy fire, observing muzzle flashes, and predicting enemy relocation, influenced Soviet doctrine well into the Cold War. Following the victory over Germany, Pavlichenko continued to serve in a reduced capacity as part of the Soviet Navy until she was formally demobilized in 1953 with the rank of major. Her post-war years were spent largely in Kiev, where she completed her studies at Kiev University and earned a degree in history. Her academic training before the war had been interrupted by the German invasion. Returning to scholarship symbolized a return to civilian life after years defined by violence and propaganda. Even outside the military, she remained a national figure. The Soviet Union placed enormous emphasis on commemorating the Great Patriotic War, and Pavlichenko's image was an essential part of this effort. Throughout the late 1940s and 1950s, she appeared at veterans' congresses, military parades, and anniversary ceremonies. The press continued to publish her wartime photographs and interviews, reinforcing her status as the archetype of the female warrior. In official publications and war films, she represented the ideal synthesis of courage, intellect, and patriotism that the Soviet state sought to promote. The Cold War years amplified her symbolic role. As tensions grew between the Soviet Union and the West, the government's cultural institutions highlighted the sacrifices and triumphs of the wartime generation to legitimize Soviet ideology. Pavlichenko's story was integrated into educational curricula and public exhibitions. Textbooks referenced her record as evidence of Soviet discipline and equality, while museums dedicated to the Great Patriotic War included her uniform, rifle, and photographs among their most visited exhibits. Her personal conduct after the war remained consistent with the disciplined, serious persona she had projected during her service. Unlike many veterans who retreated into private life, Pavlichenko remained involved in veteran organizations and political activities. She served on committees dedicated to preserving the memory of wartime heroes and ensuring the welfare of veterans and their families. Her speeches continued to emphasize unity, duty, and the importance of remembrance. Internationally, Pavlichenko's reputation also endured. Her 1942 tour in the United States and Canada had left a strong impression on Western audiences, particularly among women's organizations and journalists who had recognized her defiance against gender stereotypes. After the war, Western publications occasionally revisited her story as part of broader coverage of Soviet wartime contributions. In the early 1950s, Eleanor Roosevelt visited the Soviet Union and met Pavlichenko again, a meeting widely covered in both Soviet and American media. Their continued friendship served as a rare reminder of wartime cooperation amid rising Cold War tensions. The Soviet Union officially celebrated Pavlichenko's accomplishments through numerous awards and public honors. In addition to the Hero of the Soviet Union title and the Order of Lenin, she received commemorative medals for the defense of Odessa and Sevastopol and for victory over Germany. Her face appeared on postage stamps, and her name was given to streets, schools, and even military units. In the post-war generation, young Soviet citizens were often taught about Comrade Pavlichenko as part of patriotic education. For millions, she represented not only individual bravery, but the collective determination of Soviet women who had fought and worked for victory. From a strategic and military perspective, Pavlichenko's wartime career had lasting influence on Soviet and later Russian sniper training. During the late 1940s and early 1950s, the Red Army formalized sniper operations as a permanent component of its infantry doctrine, rather than a temporary wartime measure. Manuals emphasized the effectiveness of small, autonomous sniper teams in both defensive and offensive operations. Pavlichenko's field experiences in urban warfare, especially in Odessa and Sevastopol, were cited in internal reports analyzing the role of snipers in close-quarters environments. Her ability to adapt to shifting terrain, from city ruins to coastal cliffs, became a model for flexibility under fire. The Soviet emphasis on sniping carried forward into later conflicts, including Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan, where Soviet and Allied forces applied lessons originally drawn from Eastern Front veterans like Pavlichenko. Even into the 21st century, her name remains present in Russian and Ukrainian military academies, cited as a key figure in the development of sniper discipline and female participation in combat. Culturally, Pavlichenko's story continued to resonate within and beyond the Soviet Union. During the 1960s, she was featured in documentaries and memoir compilations celebrating wartime achievements. Soviet cinema, particularly films dedicated to the defense of Sevastopol and the heroism of women at war, drew inspiration from her life. Although she never sought fame, her image became inseparable from state narratives of endurance and sacrifice. In Ukraine, where she had been born and educated, Pavlichenko was remembered as both a Soviet and a Ukrainian heroine. The Soviet government's post-war reconstruction campaigns heavily publicized regional heroes to reinforce unity among the republics. And Pavlichenko's Ukrainian background was frequently highlighted as an example of pan-Soviet patriotism. In Kyiv, monuments and memorial plaques were erected in her honor, and local schools held annual ceremonies marking her wartime service. Despite the prestige and recognition, Pavlichenko's post-war life was not without difficulty. The psychological impact of prolonged combat, common among veterans of the Eastern Front, was an unspoken burden. Like many who had survived the siege campaigns, she experienced recurring health problems caused by wartime injuries and stress. Nonetheless, she remained active in public service until her death in 1974 at the age of 58. Her passing was marked by official mourning, and military honors were rendered at her funeral. The Soviet press praised her as a soldier who embodied the conscience and courage of the motherland. In historical terms, Pavlichenko's legacy illustrates several key aspects of Soviet wartime and post-war policy. First, she embodied the practical success of the Soviet approach to mobilizing women for combat roles. Between 1941 and 1945, an estimated 800,000 women served in the Soviet armed forces, and about 2,000 became snipers. Pavlichenko was the most successful among them and became the benchmark by which others were measured. Second, her life exemplified how the Soviet Union used individual heroism as a vehicle for state ideology, transforming soldiers into symbols of collective strength. Her career also underscored the unique relationship between gender and warfare in the Soviet system. Unlike Western militaries, which largely restricted women to nursing and clerical duties, the USSR treated their participation as both a necessity and a statement of ideological equality. Pavlichenko's achievements demonstrated that women could excel in roles traditionally reserved for men. Her prominence in wartime propaganda and post-war commemoration reinforced the Soviet narrative of female empowerment through service to the state. In later decades, as historical scholarship expanded, Western historians began to reassess Pavlichenko's story beyond propaganda. Archival research and interviews with surviving veterans confirmed the authenticity of her achievements and the accuracy of her confirmed kill count. Studies of Soviet sniper tactics identified her as a pioneer in counter-sniper operations and field adaptation. Military historians noted that her precision, patience, and intelligence under fire rivaled those of the most skilled male snipers of the war. In contemporary military history, Pavlichenko remains a central figure in discussions of marksmanship and psychological warfare. Her ability to inspire fear among German troops earned her the nickname Lady Death, a term first used by Nazi propagandists but later embraced by Soviet media as a badge of honor. German field reports from the Southern Front referred to Soviet snipers as a constant, invisible threat, and Pavlichenko's reputation was often cited among them. The psychological effect of her confirmed kills, especially against enemy snipers, demonstrated how individual specialists could influence morale and operational outcomes in positional warfare. Her legacy also transcended military history. Pavlichenko's story inspired songs, books, and academic studies. The most famous Western cultural reference came in 1963, when American folk singer Woody Guthrie wrote Miss Pavlichenko, a tribute to her wartime record and defiance of sexism. The song reintroduced her name to a new generation of listeners during the Cold War, emphasizing her courage beyond ideological boundaries. In Russia and Ukraine today, Pavlichenko continues to be honored as a national war hero. Her name appears in museums, memorials, and official military histories. Streets in cities such as Kiev, Odessa, and Sevastopol bear her name, linking her memory permanently to the places where she fought. The defense ministries of both nations continue to cite her example when discussing the role of women in the armed forces. Lyudmila Pavlichenko's legacy stands as a rare intersection of personal valor, military innovation, and political symbolism. She emerged from the most destructive conflict in human history as both a participant and a witness to the transformation of warfare and society. Her marksmanship earned her military respect. Her endurance under siege made her a legend. Her public service solidified her as an enduring symbol of Soviet perseverance. Even decades after her death, Pavlichenko remains a case study in how individual heroism can shape national identity. Her life illustrates that the Soviet victory on the Eastern Front was not achieved solely through mass numbers and industrial strength, but also through the skill, intelligence, and determination of individuals like her. Lady Death was more than a nickname. It was a reflection of the respect she commanded on both sides of the front and the enduring mark she left on the history of modern warfare.